In our first scene, we have Jim and Scout. They're up in Jim's room, and Scout is going to ask Jim a question about what he thinks about prejudices. And Scout gets an answer she does not expect. I want to ask you something.
Shoot.
Miss Gates is a nice lady, ain't she?
Why, sure. I liked her when I was in her room.
She hates Hitler a lot.
What's wrong with that?
Well, she went on today about how bad it was hating the Jews like that. Jim, it's not right to persecute anybody like that.
Gracious no, Scout. What's eating you?
Well, coming out of the courthouse that night, Miss Gates she was going on down the steps in front of us. You must have seen her. She was talking to Miss Stephanie Crawford. I heard her say, it's time somebody taught them a lesson. They were getting way above themselves. The next thing they think they can do is marry us. Jim, how can you hate Hitler so bad and turn around and be so ugly to the folks at home?
I don't ever want to hear about that courthouse again. Never, ever, ever.
You're getting too big for this now. Scout, don't let Jim get you down. He's just having a rough time. He's trying real hard to forget something, but all he's really doing is storing it away until enough time has passed. Don't worry. Things will be back to normal soon enough.
Settle down. After a fashion, as Atticus said they would, by the middle of October, only two small things out of the ordinary happened to two Maycomb citizens. No, they were three things, and they did not directly concern us, the Finches, but in a way they did. The first thing was that Mr. Bob Yule acquired and lost a job in a matter of days, and probably made himself unique in the annals of the 1930s. He was the only man I ever heard of who was fired from the WPA for laziness. I suppose his brief burst of fame brought on a briefer burst of industry, but his job lasted only as long as his notoriety. Mr. Yule found himself as forgotten as Tom Robinson. Thereafter, he resumed his regular weekly appearances at the welfare office for his check, and received it with no grace amid obscure mutterings that the bastards who thought they ran this town would permit an honest man to make a living. Ruth Jones, the welfare lady, said Mr. Yule openly accused Atticus of getting his job. She was upset enough to walk down to Atticus's office and tell him about it. Atticus told Miss Ruth not to fret, that if Bob Yule wanted to discuss Atticus getting his job, he knew the way to the office. The second thing happened to Judge Taylor. Judge Taylor was not a Sunday night churchgoer. Mr. Taylor was. Mrs. Taylor was. Judge Taylor savored his Sunday night hour alone in his big house, and church time found him holed up in his study, reading the writings of Bob Taylor. No kin, but the judge would have been proud to claim it. One Sunday night, lost in fruity metaphors and florid distinction, Judge Taylor's attention was wrenched from the page by an irritating scratching noise. "Hush," he said to Ann Taylor, his fat, nondescript dog. Then he realized he was speaking to an empty room. The scratching noise was coming from the rear of the house. Judge Taylor clumped to the back porch to let Ann out and found the screen door wide open. A shadow in the corner of the house caught his eye, and that was all he saw of his visitor. Mrs. Taylor came home to church to find her husband in his chair, lost in the writings of Bob Taylor, with a shotgun in his lap. The third thing happened to Helen Robinson, Tom's widow. If Mr. Yule was as forgotten as Tom Robinson was as forgotten as Boo Radley. But Tom was not forgotten by his employer, Mr. Link Dees. Mr. Link Dees made a job for Helen. He didn't really need her, but he said he felt right bad about the way things turned out. I never knew he took care of her children while Helen was away. Calpurnia said it was hard on Helen because she had to walk nearly a mile out of her way to avoid the Yules, who, according to Helen, chunked at her the first time she tried to use the public road. Mr. Link Dees eventually received the impression that Helen was coming to work each morning from the wrong direction, and dragged the reason out of her. "Just let it be, Mr. Link." Please, sir," Helen begged. The hell I will. said Mr. Link. He told her to come by his store that afternoon before she left. She did, and Mr. Link closed the store, put his hat firmly on his head, and walked Helen home. He walked her a short way by the Yules on his back. Mr. Link stopped at the crazy gate. "Yule," he called. "I say, Yule." The windows normally packed with children were empty.
Hush, Sam Taylor. Ann Taylor, where'd you go, girl? Come here.
What's the gun for?
We had a visitor tonight.